Sit straight, spine erect, chin away from your chest, eyes gently closed. Shift your eye gaze to the third eye, the center of the eyebrows, the Jyotishmati, the light of awareness within. Take a deep Ujjayi breath and exhale. We'll begin today's class with the opening chant. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Mahavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Welcome to our 10YEC weekly satsang. We're a fantastic satsang group that we have formed here. What we're going to do today is to continue our exploration, our inquiry into the Sankhya Yoga. For the past several weeks, we've been exploring the Sankhya, the two dimensions of the Sankhya, the two dimensions of the duality from the oneness, the Purusha and Prakriti, and to address the fundamental questions. It's like, who am I? That is the self, the Purusha. And then where am I? Is a Kshetra, which is the Prakriti that we have covered so far. And what we're going to do today is to go deeper into the dimensionality or to the experiential element of the Prakriti, which is the Triguna, the Gunas. And that dimension of the Sankhya, and that perhaps allows us to deepen our inquiry and to allow us to stitch our understanding. And more importantly, I believe this study allows us to map directly into our day-to-day experiences and understand ourselves, understand the people around us, so that we could actually connect us back to our true identity, the self, which is the Nitya Sucha Sukha Atma, so that we could always be more joyful. So let me share my screen. In the Sankhya Yoga, as always, let's start with our Dhyana Shloka. Partaya pratibodhitam bhagavata narayanena swayam vyasena grahitam purana muninam madhye mahabharatam advaitamritavarshini bhagavatim astadashadhyayini Amba Tvam Anusandadami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshini Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshini. Beautiful shloka from the Bhagwan. And today I want to spend some time talking about Sri Ramji, which is, as I say this in every class, everything that I share is as a blessing from Sri Ramji. And for this particular insight that I've had, particularly today, as I was listening to Sri Ramji's talk on Guna Traya Vibhaga Yoga. Guna Traya Vibhaga Yoga, this is from Sri Ramji's Bhagavad Gita Foundation. And this is more of a perpetual feeling for me, which is that how Sri Ramji so beautifully stitches like a pearl, like a sutra, even within the Bhagavad Gita, how he explains the concepts of Sankhya and the Guna Traya Vibhaga Yoga from effortlessly navigating through the different chapters. The Guna Traya Vibhaga Yoga is only chapter 14, but from the chapter 14, establishing the concept of the Trigunas, and then explaining the dimensionality of the Gunas from the chapter 18, and bringing it back to the chapter 2, which is the Sankhya, and then interleaving it with Patanjali Yoga Sutras and Sankhya Karika and some of the dimensions of Advaita and from his experiential, but also connecting to more modern examples. And everything that he does it is absolutely a melodious music. It's a melodious music. Even if you do not understand anything, just listening to his voice itself is madhura. It's almost like the Tena Nena Pyayasva. So I'm so blessed. I don't have words to express my gratitude for Sri Ramji as to how he entered my life, and I'm so blessed that his teachings have been my suprabhatam for most days. So that is my adulation and reverence for Sri Ramji, and I'm not the only one. There are so many of like this. So if any of you have an opportunity to follow Sri Ramji, his actually teaching some phenomenal classes at the Hindu University of in America. And I can only imagine the amount of insights and the dimensionality and the joy that he's bringing to more and more people. So with that, this particular thing, I study for a long time, like at least listen to it 20, 30 times and do it. But this time I haven't spent as much time, but I'm still thrilled. So let's see how it flows from today. So let's very quickly, we looked at what Sankhya and why Sankhya, and then the existential question of the Purusha, who am I? Our understanding is we are nothing but the Nitya Sucha Sukha Atma, which is what we understood, that we are eternal. Anything that actually tells us that we are not eternal, that we are anitya, asuchi, or a dukkha or anatma, it is only an illusion of rajus or Vadanti. We actually treat a rope for a snake. So that is because of the Prakriti that actually creates that illusion of the reality. But it was almost like, we always need to realize our true perception, the absolute perception, samyak dhyayate prakashayate, so that we connect to our true identity. And then we looked at so many different dimensions of the self, but the ultimate goal of why we need to do it, because when we are leading this life in both within our contextual settings of our family, our work, and the broader community, we're often caught ourselves in the dharma sankata of different situations, profit, loss, and some of these loss are avidya, smita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. So what Bhagavan basically says is, don't worry that we are all eternal beings. We are nothing but the eternal joy. So this jnana Sankhya is only to help us lead a more beautiful and joyful lives. And we looked at all the dimensionality, all the attributes of the soul, that it is nothing but it is nitya sucha sukha atma, which is which we covered. And then in the last class, we started looking at the Vairamaya dimension, the Prakriti. So in the Prakriti, we again looked at that this Prakriti Purusham Chaiva, the understanding of the both Purusha and Prakriti are important for us to lead this joyful life. And then what we basically looked at it is this picture. The Prakriti is made up of number one, Mahabhutas, the Panchabhutas, and then the Indriyas, in the Karma Indriyas and the Gyan Indriyas, and the perceptory organs, which is what we call as the Tanmatras. And then all of this data is being interpreted by our mind and our ahankara, and then the intellect. So the mind and the ego and the mahat basically creates this field of action around us, both within our body, kshetra, both within our body and the manifestation. But at the end of the day, the Prakriti is a layering on top of the Purusha. The Prakriti is the interpretative experience, whereas the Purusha is always like, this is always like, we are the eternal joyful beings. That is our true identity. Like one of the shloka that we looked at, which is like just like a Suryam Ravihi, which is like just like the solar, the Purusha, the witness is radiating from within. That is what is also covered in the Aditya Hridaya, which is like, our hearts or our inner beings is nothing but the Aditya, which is like, we're always eternally joyful, glowing, and radiance. That's what it is. But then we have a costume around it, a layering, a manifested costume, which is the Prakriti, that is allowing us to go through different types of experiences. And those experiences are for Bhoga Apavarga, which is to serve the Purusha, which is to create an illusionary experience or for the self. And self simply watches these movies. And it's like, oh, okay, you just, you're indulging yourself within your costume of a happy movie, thriller movie, joyful movie, prophet movie, lost movie. And the witness is always watching. But the true identity of the witness is like, there is beyond the experience, like what Shankara says, aham bhojanam naiva bhojana bhokta, which is like, I'm not the experience, I'm not the experienced, or I'm not the experience seeker. So that is what is our true identity. But when we are in this manifested duality with the Prakriti, that Prakriti makes the movies, and then the Chit, simply watches it. And then it's like, it's like, oh, okay, you're going through this kind of thing. But the thing that we basically said, where we left off is, the beautiful game that is created is we have to use the Prakriti, which is the mind and the intellect, and then all the organs, the 24 tattvas, to ultimately transcend the Prakriti. To transcend the Prakriti and repose and connect with our true identity, which is the Purusha. That is the game that we are on. And for that, Patanjali created this Ashtanga Yoga. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go into the other dimensions, which is like how does the Prakriti manifest in the Gunas? And then we are going to translate that into how could one transcend this Prakriti using all the 24 tattvas so that we can actually repose in the self. Any questions or comments before we start today's session?
Nothing from my end.
Okay. So Guna Traya Vibhaga Yoga. So this is also sometimes known as Rajasik Yoga. And sometimes, a lot of people say that this is one of the most sacred, like Rajagukya, which is like the highest form of the secret knowledge that is previously revealed by some of the saints, but Krishna then reiterates, says that again to Arjuna. So it actually starts with Bhagwan telling Arjuna, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Parambuya Pravakshyami Jnananam Jnanamuttamam Yagnatva Munya Sarve Param Siddhim Ito Gataha Param Siddhim Ito Gataha. Which is what Bhagavan says is Pravakshyami. I'm repeating this age-old or the eternal knowledge that is Munaya Sarve. That means, that is what is originally revealed by all these yogis and the eternal saints, that Arjuna, I'm actually reiterating that to you. This is the knowledge of the highest of value. And Bhagavan Krishna is an interesting teacher. He plays this Leela, which is like, to excite Arjuna, sometimes he adds this embellishments. It's just like, hey, dude, this is the highest of this knowledge. We can perhaps, learn that. Sometimes you have to do some of the positioning to do this. So it's like, when he is revealing this, he says that, this is the highest knowledge. But, sometimes when he goes to the bhakti, he always says like, bhakti is the highest knowledge. And sometimes, he does the karma, he says like, karma is the highest knowledge, or Sankhya is the highest knowledge. It's like he places Leela. But this is one of the, this is how Bhagwan, start explaining about this highest knowledge of the Triguna, the three manifestations of the Prakriti. How Prakriti arranges itself for us to have the different experiences. And that's right word is how Prakriti arranges itself to create different experiences. So then, Krishna gets right into it. And then this is where he explains the three gunas. Sattvam Rajasthama iti guna prakriti sambhavaha nimadnati mahabaho dehe dehinam avyayam. Mahabaho dehe dehinam avyayam. So this thing is the three gunas, the Sattvam, Rajas, Tama. These three gunas, this triad, is or the born out of the Prakriti Sambhava. They're born out of this Prakriti, these three gunas. And these are attached to our body and the body, you know, dehe dehinam bandhanam. So they basically attach itself as the body to the Purusham to create the different experiences. So this is like, you know, when we are actually is being born into this costume, essentially the self is superimposed with the costume, and then the costume has these three gunas and the triad of the gunas. And that's how we are creating different experiential reality. It's the experiential reality. But when as we see as we go along in this inquiry, that we see that someday we're going to transcend, you know, these gunas, this experiential reality, to repose with our absolute reality, which is the Purusha, that is the absolute reality. But the Prakriti is all manifested experiential reality, and that is made up of these three gunas, Sattvam, Rajas, Tama iti gunaha. And they basically get attached to the self as a body. As a body. Again, the body is, there are two kshetras. One is the Sharira, the other one is the cosmic body. The universe also has as a body. From the Hiranyagarbha, we actually see this as a manifested body. Those three are then manifested as the three gunas. And then, so this is kind of how the pictorial visualization of this picture. Like, for example, you know, like in the Aditya Hrudayam, which is like the Purusha is like the sun, which is that effervescent, radiant, brilliant, eternal joy, Nitya Sucha Sukha Atma. It's constantly radiating through us. And then there is this Prakriti from the duality. Now there's a Prakriti, and the Prakriti is made up of the 24 tattvas, which is where we have the Panchabhutas, and then the 15 the organs, karmendriyas and the gyanendriyas and tanmatras, and then, you know, buddhi and the intellect and the mind. And then this all is actually mapped to the category itself into the three lenses, you know, three filters, which is like sattva, rajas, and tamas. And this is the triad that is actually overlaid, or that is how the Prakriti is arranged. Then that's how we are actually interpreting the world. You know, the other time, you know, we've actually seen a picture which is like uncoloring the color of the mind. So the gunas brings all the coloring. Gunas bring all the coloring. And then the first one is sattva. Sattva is essentially is like, you know, it is very revealing. It is very clear. It's revealing. What it means is, when we are establishing the sattva, we are letting the Purusha's light simply pass through. We're letting it reveal the Purusha's brilliance, reveal it through. When we are in the state of sattva, we're actually letting it simply being, you know, translucent. We are letting the Purusha express itself. So that's when somebody in sattva, we say that their actions and the thoughts are divine. It means the Purusha is exhibiting itself. And then the tamas is the filter. When we are in the tamas, we're almost like avarnam. It's like a smoke. We are trying to block. We are trying to eclipse the Purusha. We're acting almost like anti-Purusha, which is where we're exhibiting a coloring which is somewhat of a dark, tamas, darkness. We are kind of, you know, it's like a grahanam. We're eclipsing the Purusha. And we're going to see this dimensionality. And the rajas is the way the Prakriti is arranging itself to create conflict. To a conflict and the turbulent, lot of action, turbulent activity. So the Prakriti is, you know, doing it is almost like a cyclonic type of an activity. And that is basically is like, you know, it's almost like a transformational conflictive activity. Sattva is simply letting the revealing, which is letting the Purusha see through it. Tamas is kind of a blocking or eclipsing. And Rajas is more of a conflicting or the turbulent activity. When we look at it, yes, of course, you know, in the yogic world, we always want to be in the Satwik state, But it doesn't mean that the other gunas are inferior. They have its own purpose. They have its own purpose. Like, for example, if you look at tamas, like the blocking, sometimes we actually use the blocking to create the right effect. Like, for example, if you take the funnel, you actually pour oil or the water in a funnel so that we can actually get a forceful output, like a laminar flow. Or when you are irrigating the fields, instead of letting the simple water spread all over across, you actually, Patanjali gives us a sutra, you actually create some canals, some blockages, so that you direct the energy in one way. Okay? Sometimes, even when we are doing the asana practice, sometimes we actually block, hold the breath. We try to, do bandhas to actually have either cleaning. And then sometimes, you can also interpret bandhas could also be like a rajas. But there are certain, like a dam, you put a blockage so that you can actually regulate the turbulent stuff. So it doesn't mean that the tamas kind of filtering is necessarily an inferior thing, but it has to be used to serve a purpose. But ultimately, as a yoga, we always need to elevate ourselves in sattva. Now let's look at rajas. Rajas is that the conflicting of the turbulent activity. The turbulent activity sometimes is needed. Like, for example, when the light is flowing, if you want to create a fire, a forest fire, to create a transformation or to reseed in the forest, you have to put a magnifying glass to create fire. And from the fire, you actually, do other things, the Agni. Or things like Pranayama. You actually create Ujjayi to actually create some kind of a restrictive kind of activity to be able to do that. Or even to create the transformation of the water to vapor. You have to have rajas. So again, the Prakriti arranges itself to create different types of experiential reality to let the Purusha function itself. In some cases, you block it, but it has its own purpose. Like, for example, even for us to sleep, you need to be in tamas state. You need to be in a tamas state to allow sleep to happen. So we're going to look at the different aspects of the dimension. But again, the Purusha is our true being, and it doesn't need any experiences. It becomes as apavarga. In other words, there is no experiential. But the fact that we are being manifested in the creation of this duality, when the Prakriti comes in, then the Prakriti with the gunas, it creates that experiential reality. And sometimes a combination, sattva plus rajas. Sattva plus rajas is when we create yajnas, as an example. Sattva plus rajas. Sometimes sattva plus tamas is how you irrigate your fields. Irrigate these fields. So this is not a three distinct kind of states. There is a mixture. It's almost like a triad, and the mixing of the different elements of the gunas creates a type of experiential reality, both within and the field around us. And that's how the Prakriti is how we experience itself. And that creates different emotions and intellect and all the drama of the movies. So any questions or comments on this?
Yeah, I have a question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
My question is, being aware of all these gunas, do we have control over to flow through these gunas, like in between, like, today, like automatically block the other two? If I want to go to sleep, do I have the power to block the other two and activate only tamas at that point of time?
Correct.
Correct. When I'm super excited, I can figure out, oh, maybe I should calm down and, like, can I mix and match as and when it's required?
Yes, yes, exactly. That is what is Ashtanga Yoga is designed for. In fact, we're going to look into it. I'm going to just reveal a little bit of the secret. Like, for example, in the yoga, there is a technique that we covered before, like asanas reduce the rajas. And then so the way this triad works is when you suppress one, the other two kind of elevate, or when you suppress, something, then something else dominate, because there is always this complete picture. So when you reduce rajas, then the tamas and sattva elevate. And then when you reduce, for example, pranayama reduces tamas. So when you do that, then you actually elevate sattva and rajas, right? So if you want to do some kind of an entrepreneurial activity where you want to go create a business plan or some other stuff, that's what we say is like, go do pranayama. And when there is like so much of turbulent activity that you're going through, a lot of, turbulent, which may not sound as an intuitive, but it basically says like do asanas at that time. Asanas actually reduces
But
rajas.
what if we don't have time to do that? Like again, like I want to make a decision right now, but okay,
Correct.
we can't say, hold on, let me go and do yogasana and come back. You know what I mean?
So
I mean, without these things, do we have? Is it the consciousness, being conscious about it? Can I flow through the things without?
Absolutely. In fact, all these things, Bhagavad Gita has 18 chapters. There are so many tools that are presented it. Like, for example, karma yoga is like, lack of the sense of doership, so that, you remove the chatter. So when you are actually, or the bhakti yoga, seeing, the divine in every offering, so that, why don't you get to sleep? Because you have a lot of chatter. And usually it's because of whatever the things that you're involved in. So all these tools, everything is very nicely linked with each other. So it's not like one or the other. So they gave a bouquet it's like a buffet of the tools. Right? Even the Ashtanga Yoga, it is to create the right guna. So it is like you cannot pick and choose. The reason why the yama and niyama is like it's almost like an irrigation, right? To create the right kshetra for you, with the right universal human values. Then, asanas, then pranayama, then the pratyahara, then you prepare the kshetra with all the bahiranga sadhana, so that you can actually do it. But then the basically says like, beautiful thing that they said is Patanjali was so genius. He defined as Ashtanga Yoga, not like 8 different stages. You master yama first, then you go to this. Like, so we are simultaneously growing each and every limb. So as we are moving on this journey, doing some yoga, doing some pranayama, doing some universal values, doing some seva, doing some satsang, and doing some pratyahara, restraining ourselves, not being driven by this, and then doing some meditation and mindfulness. So what we are doing is we are actually we are changing our own prakriti. So that
I don't know if I can changing certain. I think without identifying which one is exalted in my own nature, why would I concentrate on if I'm already exalted with tamas? So it's like diagnosing the problem and then finding the cure for that, right? Like or medicating.
Correct. I think what we basically do is
even if I do satsang, do I not get angry or whatever? Of course I get angry. Of course I'm saying.
Finish your
like
thought,
I mean, yeah. So it's like I feel the only way is like being conscious, constantly being conscious of our action, or conscious of our. I don't know if that is possible, but I think
that is the only way. Is in fact we have to be a conscious being. That is a common substrate. The moment when you're not conscious, that means what you do is you're operating with kind of a superimposed kind of a thing, right? So what do you mean by conscious?
I mean, like knowing that, oh, my rajas, like it's like, oh, I have blood pressure, I should not eat salt, or I have diabetic, I should not eat sugar. Kind of knowing which is more exalted. I think that's where I'm thinking one should start.
I think that is of a discovery thing, but as I said, being conscious, what you're talking about is more of a diagnostic thing, right? The diagnostic is just like where I have like which is what we are kind of I think what is this technique in the Ramakanchi, do you know? Like Vajroli, we have some techniques, right, where we can actually pluck the thoughts from other people's brain in the yoga journey.
Clairvoyance? Are you saying clairvoyance? Or are you referring to clairvoyance or?
No, clairvoyance is that intuitive thing, but it is like you can actually pluck the thoughts from other people's minds. I actually experienced it.
Got it.
Yeah. But what I mean to say is, this is what is used even in Ayurveda. The gunas is actually mapped to the doshas, right? In the body, like the vata, pitta, and kapha, and then they basically look at your moods, because in our field, like the disease is nothing but everything starts from the mind and the gunas and your nature. It is not a standalone byproduct of some chemical process. It actually, everything comes from the mind and the gunas and the nature. So basically, it's like the way you are behaving is going to manifest later into some kind of a disease, right? That is what the Ayurveda. So I'm not going to go into all the details, but this is how people actually, how our entire well-being is mapped to. The gunas mapped to the elements, the dominant elements in you, the vata, pitta, and kapha, and that defines your nature. And that's how they basically diagnose you, which is like, hey, you're a pitta dude, like some people told me, I think, perhaps, it's just like, you're a pitta dude, you have too much fire, you're a strong leader. But if I'm a strong leader, and if I'm too Rajasik, then I can easily get angry, right? Even for me, could be a good reason, but the way it's going to manifest is I'm hot-tempered, right? Which is what I was known for. And if you're tamasic by nature, and that leads to crime. Whereas in the Rajasik, you might be like a CEO of a company. The way you come in is like you just come and do everything left and right. And if something doesn't go right and inefficient, the way you act is, it's just like, you simply go through your thing without being aware of people's emotion, right? Whether you're right or wrong is a different thing. You could be in the right place. But if you're sattva, you try to bring a communal, you try to take people with you, you're patient, compassion, upeksha, and all those things. So what people are saying is,
but if I am, like I've tried to diagnose myself in a way, but I feel it's like I'm more sattva guna for when it comes to my daughter or whatever it is. I'm more rajas guna in at work or whatever it is. Like, so I feel certain things are more exalted in certain environment or a certain relationships. So again, when you diagnose yourself with the other doshas, kapha or whatever it is, each weather actually your doshas change actually. Correct. In winter you have a different combination. In summer you have a different combination.
Can I suggest something? Which is like, this is again Patanjali. There is another thing where, for this very simple example that we did, and then we move on to the next thing. There is gunas, there is klesha, then there is doshas. Before that is kleshas. The kleshas, avidya and asmita. Because you are treating your daughter differently than at a workplace because of the asmita or raga dvesha, which is like, because asmita is like, you have a certain element of bonding with your daughter, which is like, she is mine. The work is not yours. So that again, it all starts with the Patanjali laid out the entire thing. The reason why we are all in the chatter, because we are not necessarily bad people. The thing is, in fact, and I actually believe that the root of all misery, most of the misery in this world is asmita. In fact, this family as a construct. In fact, some people have told me who are actually spiritual people, they actually tell me it's like, with my son or with my daughter, I have unconditional love. That means even if they go to prison, I'll try to take them out. Right? So, but why can't you follow the same thing? If somebody does a bad thing, if they go to the prison, which is like, you simply say, it's like, hey, I'm with you. I'm on a fight against my thing. How many people actually do that? We have to have a revolutionary movies. I think, what is that movie that Anupam Kher had, at one time, where he fights against his own son based on the Gandhian principles? Because that's what is, I actually believe this is family maya. And this is what Patanjali critically said. First, it starts with avidya. That is the mula root klesha. Then the next big thing is asmita. Me, mine, and this stuff. And the crux of this thing is this umbilical cord. And that is
and just I'll just close it in a few seconds. Couple things, right? Number one is remembrance, right? That is the last sloka of the 5th chapter. It says, Bhoktaram yajna tapasam sarva loka maheshwaram. Okay, he's the substratum for everything. Bhoktaram yajna tapasam. Whatever we do goes to the primordial energy, right? So Bhoktaram yajna tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam, like a sahodara, like a friend, sarvabhutanam, within everything in this universe. Jnatva mam shanti muchyati. That is, Jnatva, as soon as you remember that he is the Bhokta for whatever you do, and he is residing, he or she, whatever, that energy is residing within all hearts, like a suhrida, like a friend. Jnatva shanti mruchyati. Right? As soon as you remember that, you slip into the shantiness. So whatever we do, as soon as we know that this is the ultimate end, what do we do to that? So going back to your thing, you said, okay, when I cannot sleep, any situation, instead of discussing about I, you, me, daughter, or anything, as soon as we remember the creator and his creation, the wow factor within us, suddenly the question marks or the stars or whatever suddenly change into cool exclamation mark. You're in a wow mode. Oh my goodness, wow. So suddenly things change. So that is one answer. Second dimension, you talked about the daughter and all, is all about as soon as we remember. Again, this is remember. That is, kids are born through us.
So can we call saying surrender to the universe?
Same thing. See, those words are all the same. The love, the surrender, remembering, prayer, doing it multiple times. All these are the same words for the same action or the bhava, right? So the second thing is all about when we said children, as soon as we at some point realize, and it's not just, we can't fake this, right? As soon as we realize that kids are born through me and not to me, right? As soon as we know that kids are born through us and not to us, a big quality, a wonderful digital jump happens in our life. Right? So with that, back to you. Back to you.
This one is very, very, very difficult. Just like, to some extent, when we look at, examples like Buddha or Gandhi or some of this stuff, where they tried looking at the entire world as, the oneness as an example, right? And then what people say is, it's like, it's not a good father, or it's not a good mother, or it's like a good family. So this asmita is one of the biggest things that we all struggle with in the thing. So in other words, we have to do our duties, but at the same time, at some level, can we establish this sense of oneness? So that, Savitaji, you asked the question, right? So that we can respond to the things equally or equanimally in most situations. Like, somebody steals something, right? As an example, the way you actually deal with, somebody who does the same stealing, like to see the things that they are. The moment you put the conditional filter, like, but this is my daughter, I would have to deal a different way. This is, my colleague who did it a different way. Or this is somebody that in a different way. That means we've actually, suddenly we are operating from a colored mind. Yes, but this is the Maya. Maya is like it put us into all this, like what is called janjatam, sort of the relationships and, bondings and this stuff. And this is where we have to slowly arise. While we do our duty, like what Ramakanji says, like everybody is born through us, not to us. And we are born, our parents gave birth to us at some point, we are actually doing it. Whatever the thing that happens to us, it is our karma, our deeds, and our Guna Karma Vibhaga Shahai. It's kind of our thing. But I think we have to invest in showing our kids the right path. But this asmita cannot go to an extreme where it creates a differential treatment. So that's kind of one of the things that I've been spending a lot of time on, this asmita kind of stuff, and it is very real. This world, I think, a lot of these conflicts are coming from the asmita, like, the inheritance, right? Rich only would want to make something for the generations and generations. They're accumulating wealth. And some weddings, where people say spend thousands and thousands of crores. It's all an exhibition of asmita, spectacle. And Bhoga Porga, and then the self simply smiles, smirks. Oh, what a grand display of the spectacle of ignorance that's at play, the kleshas. So that is one of the things. And then what we do is we'll actually look at the dimensions of the sattva, and then we'll also get to some techniques on how we can work to overcome some of these the gunas. The sattva. So how do we define sattva? So sattva is, as Bhagavan says, like, tatra sattvam nirmalatvat prakashakam anamayam sukha sangena badnati jnana sangena chanaga. So sattva, the revealing nature of the guna, is defined by, number one, it's nirmalatvam. Nirmalatvam is equanimous, being the joyful state always. Prakashakam, it's brilliant. It's just like the Purusha. It's bringing that brilliance and radiance. Anamayam. Anamayam is like without any blemishes. It's like that pure crystal diamond. So one without any blemishes, one without always being in that equanimous state, and prakashakam, letting the brilliance to shine through. And then it's always sukha sangena badnati. So this joyfulness is bound to the body. And that's how it is presents to it. The experience it actually creates to the Prakriti, and then the movie that it creates is, it feels like the intellect interprets it as the joyful thing. And we think that, oh, this particular state, the people around me or the situations around me in this situation creates this Satwik state. So you're more joyful in that experience. And that is what we call it as a Satvikam. And then Prakashakam, you're like exuberant and without any blemishes, and then equanimous, there is no chatter. And then this is what is being presented to the Purusha as the joyful thing. And then we equate it to certain combination of the Prakriti, like, there are the situations, and that's how the intellect presents it. But the Purusha is always in that state. But in the realm of the Prakriti, this is how the experience is being associated with. This is how it's being associated with. And then Rajas. Rajo ragatmakam viddhi trishna sangha samudbhavam tannibadnati kaunteya karma sangena dehinam. The first line, let's inquire into the first line. Rajo ragatmakam. Ragatmakam, it's one of the kleshas that Patanjali defines, which is avidya asmita raga. Raga is driven by something that you crave or something that you love about. Something that you love, that's something that you would want. And Trishna Sangha Samudbhavam, it's desire, it's driven by a desire, Trishna. Trishna is Trishna Sangha Samudbhavam, driven by a desire. And this desire is when it is created from a sense of lack. It's not a desire from a sense of fullness. And it's a desire that is, there is two types of wants that one could have. It's just like, I would want to go express my joy and do something for somebody, but it is from the fullness. But when the Trishna is when it is from a sense of lack, Trishna Sangha Samudbhavam, Tannibadnati, that is how it's bound itself to the Prakriti to create this experience. How does this manifest? It results in karma sangena dehitam. It results in an action. So you're always trying to do things. So to fulfill that, the Trishna, and driven by the ragatmakam to something that you love or crave. That's how it actually bound to the Purusha in the Prakriti, and that is how it manifests, this guna of raga. Does it make sense? And the beautiful thing is, Rajas always results in an action. And the karma, you're trying to do something to fulfill these desires, to fulfill this sense of lack. And that is Rajoguna. It's passion and pursuit and dynamism. And then let's look at tamas. Tamas vagnagnam vid dvagnanajam. Tamas vagnanajam viddi mohanam sarvadehinam pramada alasya nidra abhistan nimadnati bharata. So first one is, which is like it's first of all is rooted from agnanam, the ignorance. It's rooted from ignorance, from mohanam, from delusion. You have certain delusionally cravings. And rooted from pramada. Pramada, we've already looked at the 10 obstacles in the yoga practice. Pramada alasya nidra avisthan, driven by carelessness. Alasya, laziness. Nidra, from sleepy, the darkness. And that is how you actually delude yourself, and you put yourself into either very lethargic or negative emotion and the carelessness, and from that ajnana, that is how you try to act. This is tamas. Sattva is nirmalatvam prakashatam anamayam, which is like without any blemish, with brilliance and with equanimous state, and you always are in that joyful experience. Rajas is too much action. Your action, to create something, it's a sense of lack, you want to accomplish certain things. And then tamas is that the lethargy, carelessness, and the sleepiness, and from a delusionary mind. The delusionary mind. And then the beautiful thing here is these three, how do they are like interconnected, intermixed, which is like this is one of the beautiful slokas. What Krishna reveals is how do the three gunas work with each other. And what Krishna says is, Rajas tamash chavibhuya sattvam bhavati bharata rajas sattvam tamaschaiva tamas sattvam rajas tataha. So what it means is the first line, when you suppress rajas and tamas, when you suppress rajas tamas chavibhuya sattvam bhavati bharata, when you work on suppressing, reducing the rajas and tamas within your body or within your nature, within and around you, then the sattvam is going to, dormant. It is going to elevate itself. So in other words, this is like a composition. So the more you reduce the other two, the other guna is going to become more dormant. And then what it also says is like, and then the second line basically says like the combination. Rajas sattvam tamas chaiva, tamas sattvam rajas sacha. So when you suppress rajas and sattvam, then tamas is going to arise. And then when you suppress sattvam and tamas, then the rajas is going to arise. Like for example, if you would want to create fire, then you cannot be sattva, always brilliant and being more joyful and stuff. You need to create that conflict and the turbulent activity to create that fire. And if you're trying to be a change agent and the entrepreneurial thing, you cannot really be be a consensus builder or always in this stuff. There are certain, to be able to disrupt. And even things like if you want to build more sattva, you have to invest yourself in doing yogasana and pranayama. You have to get out of the slumber. You have to act. And to break that patterns, what you're being there, only then the other things are going to manifest. So you have to reduce your tamas and sattva to get into an activity, to be able to, let's say if you want to lose weight, you have to get into running, to lift weights. You cannot be always like, chanting mantras and stuff. So you would have to do some action. So this is the balance of this. Does this make sense? This is a very beautiful sloka, where in one shloka, Bhagwan realizes the dynamics of how the gunas operate. So this is where
textually it makes sense.
Now let's actually see this, how this actually works, right? In the yoga, our journey has always been in this balancing the gunas. And then eventually we need to build more sattva. So that is the yoga's pursuit, is to get into this. The three techniques that we are trying to always do, right? Number one, asanas reduce the rajas. And there is a beautiful Patanjali Yoga Sutra. The benefit of the asana is tato dvandva anabhigataha. Anabhigataha, dvandva. Dvandva is the conflicts. The conflicts will be anabhigataha, reduced. So by doing more of an asana practice, we actually reduce the rajas within our guna, within our nature. Pranayama reduces the tamas, tamasoma jyotirgamaya. And Patanjali said one of the benefits of pranayama in Patanjali Yoga Sutra, tatakshiyate prakasha avaranam. Avaranam is the smoke. So we basically kshiyate, we basically reduce the smoke to actually do the pranayama. So when you do the asana, you reduce the rajas, when you reduce the rajas. But when you reduce the rajas, it can result in one of two things. Tamas could be elevated or sattva could be elevated. Either one could actually manifest based on your other nature. That is the reason whenever you do asanas, we have to do pranayama so that you can also suppress the tamas, so that we give room for sattva to elevate. Most of our yoga practice, a lot of people have, a lot of these compositions, right? They spend 30 to 40 minutes in asanas, and then dedicate some 10 to 15 minutes in pranayama. And then, we leave some 5 to 10 minutes into sattva. Or some people even compartmentalize it. Like, in the morning we do asanas, and then we leave the meditation to evening. But what we are missing out is, we are missing out the whole understanding of these gunas. In the asanas and pranayama, number one, to make sure that when you do the asanas, the tamas doesn't elevate, we must do pranayama. In fact, once you cross 35 or 40, pranayama needs to be at least the same, if not double. That's why Patanjali also gave 6 sutras for pranayama, when he only gave 3 sutras for asanas. That means, just to remind us that, indicate more time for pranayama than asanas. But most of us, we only do the thing. And then what happens is, sometimes their tamas gets elevated. Instead of being in the sattva, it again comes down to their very nature, their yama, niyama, and they control on their indriyas and all that stuff. Very possible that you could be tamas. So you could be really physically fit, right? Some of the physical conflicts are taken over, but you use it for some wrong reasons. So tamasic activities. It's one of the reasons why it's extremely imperative. And then the way to do this is that, of course, we don't have enough time. That is one of the reasons why we always say, like, whatever the yogasana is doing, you always incorporate pranayama with it. In fact, pranayama needs to be the way you do the asanas. And then you also, I dedicate some more time for the pranayama, so that you actually allow the sattva to raise above you. Then dhyana elevates the sattva. We looked at some of the sutras like Trayam Ekatva Samyama. Then Tat creates the Prajnaloka, Tat Prajnaloka. In that meditative state, you then become more sattva and you tap into that Prajnaloka, that intuitive powers within you, where the Purusha is operating. It's not the mind or the intellect that is powering your decisions. And this is one of the techniques. So when we are doing the yoga practice and all that kind of stuff, we always need to be reminded that pranayama needs to accompany. And then after you do the yoga and rajas and tamas, do some meditation at that time. dedicate more time for meditation so that you actually work so hard to suppress the tamas and rajas. Use that beautiful opportunity, kshetra, that you created to elevate more sattva within you. This is one of the beautiful secrets. But eventually, what is our ultimate pursuit is to transcending these gunas. And Patanjali says, Tatparam Purushakyate Gunavaitrushna. We become gunaless. We become Purusha. Purusha doesn't have any Prakriti. It's like we are all eternal joyful. So we don't need experience. Gunas create that experience. We shift from experiential reality to absolute reality. So does this make sense? The asanas, pranayama, and the dhyana?
Yeah, for me, yes, it makes sense. But again, application.
No, there is no
timely
absolute state.
application. I'm saying timely application is the key.
I think Saikaji, I mean, see, here is the story, right? The more we repeat, I mean, I also, one of the masters where I listen from Patanjali Yoga Sutras, he talks about the definition of abhyasa is more of a word repeat. It is not practice actually, right? He says repeat. And what do I repeat? Repeat the process. And whatever the slokas we are hearing here, and we, as soon as somebody says, oh, these are the three gunas, now we make a big thing and say, oh, this has to be perfect. There is nothing of that kind. Like, the more you get your feet wet again and again and again and again, that's all it's all about, right? Just repeating this multiple times a day, multiple times, remembering to repeat this process and repeating so that we can remember. That's all. Repeat to remember and remember to repeat. And what do we repeat? Just the process, just the kriya. That's why it doesn't matter who. Somebody sits there, just breathes for a few seconds, boom, he'll get the result. That is what is kriya all about. Absolute scientific, right? Back to you, Srinish.
This is the beautifully said, Ramakanji. What it actually means is, how do you bring it to an application? We can start with one action. Tomorrow morning when we do the yoga class, make sure that the pranayama is, definitely more than asanas. That means, always make a conscious awareness attempt to do our yoga practice with pranayama. So in fact, put more emphasis on pranayama than the actual posture. So we can even back off from the posture if it is not syncing with the pranayama. And then, but it doesn't happen overnight. That's where the abhyasa comes in, right? So the dirgha kala nairantara satkara sevito drudabhumihi is a repeat, long thing. And then we all make a conscious thing is like after doing the asanas and pranayama, we'll great. In fact, that was one of the feedback that you gave me from our class, that we need to spend more time on the meditation towards the end. And these things are being aware of it and then trying to make changes to reorient it, and then over a long period of time, then they become part of you. And then initially it looks different because you're trying to change behaviors. You change behaviors, and that's what it says. Prayatna Saitalya Ananta Samapatyavam. Initially it puts an effort to reorient ourselves, to incorporate more pranayama into our practice, to remind ourselves of yama niyama, but always this continuous repeat and remember of our kriya, our shravanam, our mananam, and then make as many changes, being consciously aware being, and then making that as part of the thing. Eventually, it just becomes part of your being, the very nature. And you don't even, at that time, prayatna shaitali ananta samapatibhyam. So which is like, initially it looks like an effort. You're making a conscious effort to remember, remind, and this and that, like one of the beautiful techniques that you have. Like the way you do the dharana is, you always lock into an hour. But eventually it just becomes very nature. Then Shaitilya, in other words, you're not even, effort becomes effortless. And that's when the Ananta Samapatibhyam happens. And that's when it becomes your second nature. You rewire your nature. But until that time, you're being a conscious being, being aware of whatever you're there. Don't judge ourselves. If something doesn't do it, we just move on to it and then simply laugh at it. And then we try it from there. But once we start judging, and if you try to criticize ourselves, then again we go backwards. We just need to move forward. Okay, so
that's tamasic in nature, right? Criticizing or all is just going to bring you down. And the one quick thing I wanted to say was, for pranayama, you don't really need to allocate time. You could be at a red light doing that. You could be in a meeting and be conscious of your breath. And I do that. I practice it all the time. I do kumbhak. Nobody knows that I'm doing kumbhak. You know, I do the slow breathing. I'll hold for I do 1 4 2 2 like Patanjali talks about. It does not, and then it becomes second nature. Like anytime there's like discussions that are like elevated or friction, without even knowing, I start to breathe slow, and then it gives me a chance to process things and not get pulled into the rut of the maybe a volatile discussion. And I've also right now all of us have to work from home. That's what I'm having to do. Otherwise, anytime I was at a red light, I would say this is my opportunity to be more aware and do pranayama.
Actually, that's so
I know
beautiful.
asanas, obviously you cannot, right? That is a dedicated time. And asanas for me, they've always been, again, like kumbhak, inhale, hold the pose, exhale, come back to return. So I think, with the regular practice, it just becomes second nature. And then because you're doing all these, you start to, obviously my children are most important, but I can actually see them as outside of my children. Like, I think Khalil Gibran talks about it. They come through you, but they're not, they don't belong to you. I have to find that and send it out. Maybe, I don't know if you guys listen to or read Sufi poets or what, but they're very bhakti oriented. So Srini, I'll be quiet after that.
No, that's beautiful. This is what actually, I mean, I don't want to take over, hijack all this stuff. My life experience when I was going through the best tool that was given to me was Ujjayi Pranayama. And like what it says, Kumbhak, and the Kumbhak is in all the things, whenever I'm getting into a little bit of this situation, my game, even driving, I don't even need a red light. When I'm all by myself, I'm always
exactly. But then see that with when you're at a red light, right? Often you're like, when is this going to change? This is what I know, because the old me used to think, kab badlega, right mab kab jayenge, straight kab jayenge, right? So instead, take that an opportunity. I'm like, I've had people tap on their honk at me because I'm so plugged away.
Actually, a lot of people are honking at me nowadays. It's just like I'm concerned.
I guess you're celebrating then. That's good.
but basically, this is one of the techniques that I think in the pranayama, where the kumbhak that you revealed, it is one of the greatest things. If you can actually take a deep breath and just hold the breath and just do the counting and then make that as a game. How long can you hold it? And there is a game that we used to play, which is like, how much one inhale and exhale, what is the clock? And when I'm driving, that is one of the games that I play. I mean, it's beautiful. Sometimes it will be a minute, sometimes it will be 2 minutes, just one inhale and exhale. I mean, of course, the fourth stage.
The whole cycle. Yeah.
The whole cycle. And it's a beautiful game. And then when you do it, it's unbelievable the level of clarity it brings in. And then
Kumbhak is the best pranayama, even according to Patanjali. For whatever reason, it's not very touted. But I also think it is probably difficult, Srini, for people to hold because you gasp for air. Because way back when I couldn't. When I can hold for 60 seconds now, and that didn't happen overnight.
Yeah. And I think what I've seen, when you master the pranayama, you can actually go to a different thing. But what it had actually done for me, I mean, this is fact. There was a period in time, 2007, I used to have high blood pressure or the plus thing. It actually now completely changed the other thing.
Yeah, Kumbhak brings BP down and calms the mind. And I think in my case, it's helping my underactive thyroid. I'm taking less medicine, and that's just because I've started to do serious Kumbhak pranayam since January of this year, like 7-8 months, whatever. So I'm seeing physiological changes from Kumbhak.
Physiologically, like last 7-8 years, it's just like every time I go back to the same doctor that I was seeing in 2007. It's like, dude, it's almost like an operating system rewriting. So anyway,
okay,
let's very quickly. So we're gonna move into it. And Bhagavan Krishna said, just like the one of the thing is Udvam gachanti satvasta madhye tishtanti rajasa Jaganya Gunapattistam Ado Gachanti Tamasaha. So people who are in the Tamasaha, their energies are going downward. So they are actually, I mean, this one is like people who are situated in the Sattva nature, their energy is flowing upward. In fact, we could even map it to kind of the Kundalini energy with the chakras, always have to, the energies, need to be without any blockages, need to be, freely move upwards. And people who are in the tamasaha, they are actually going downwards, and everything else is blocked upwards. And then people who are rajas, they're more in the middle state, they're stuck there. And then people who are on the sattva, they're like free flowing and upwards, right? Then let's look at few dimensions of the gunas, right? So which is like the dimensions of the guna, like the knowledge. We're going to look at 4 dimensions. That what are the different types of knowledge that we are referring to? What are the types of different actions? What are the different types of happiness? And then what are the different types of even giving? What are the different types of giving? They all come in. This is where the Sri Ramji's master will take from the 14th. He connects it to the 18th chapter. So what is the Satwik knowledge? This is very, very important actually. Sarvabhuteshu yenaikam bhavamavyayamikshate avibhaktam vibhakteshu tajjanam viddhi sattvikam. What it means is that knowledge that's always trying to look at the unity. What is the commonality? That knowledge that is not trying to divide, but seeking unity. That knowledge that is bringing excellence. So when we are actually pursuing different knowledge, are we trying to look for the commonality and seeking the oneness that is there? Or are we trying to say is like, this knowledge, my Shiva, philosophy is better than your Vishnu philosophy? Or my Sai Baba is better than, your whatever, or my other faith is better than this stuff. That type of knowledge, anything that is actually trying to say like, we are different, that is not considered a Satwik knowledge. Satwik knowledge is always looking at all the dimensions and is always trying to connect them and seeing oneness. And also that Gnana is also seeing oneness in all the beings and seeing that excellence.
It comes from the neutral space.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, because we are all seeing that in the divinity within everything. And then we are actually being upeksha, the things that are different, we're just being indifferent, but we are actually shifting our awareness to where the connectedness is. And we're only emphasizing on that, showing the light on that. Right? That is what is a Satwik knowledge. So like, I mean, that is been one of my pursuits, which is like, when we read all the scriptures or the Karma Yoga or which is where, bhakti and all this stuff, but how do we bring it all this into one element of commonality? As opposed to, it's like, the division, which is like, we compartmentalize it. It's like, Mr. Ganesha, you own this department. And then, Anjaneya, you own that other department. Shiva is that, this is this. And then there's so much fights that are happening. It's just like, somebody says like, Narayana is the ultimate. And somebody says like, no, Shiva is ultimate. But there is a beautiful story from Chaganti. Rameshwaram, is it Ramas Ishwara or Ishwara's Rama? And apparently there's Shiva and, all these, saints and the gods, go and says like, let's actually go both of them. Go to them and then, settle this. And then they go to Vishnu and says like, Rameshwara, are you Shiva's Rama or Rama's, Ishwara? And then Vishnu says like, no, it's everything is Ishwara. Shiva is the dude. I'm part of him. And then they all, go happy, and then they go to Shiva. And just like, hey, we got the answer. It's just like, and then he says like, no. It is like, this is Rama's Ishwara. He says like, I'm actually his being. And then they get confused. Both of them are saying like, I'm the other person's being. And then the Narada comes. And it's like, what is this, dilemma? How do we settle this? And says like, dude, both are one and the same. Both are one and the same. They are, just the different manifestations, but don't.
And I think these stories are there to help us understand that there is no distinctions. But if you can identify with a Shiva with a third eye and a snake around his neck and a moon is in his head, then so be it. Like it is something that'll help you to progress and hopefully eventually transcend beyond the avatar.
That's right, because we are all mixtures of gunas. Because of our mixtures of gunas and our conditioning and all that stuff, we basically make an ethos, pathos, logos to one dimension, one representation, right? But when that representation happens, Patanjali says, Eka Tattva Abhyasa, you can, if you identify it, you can meditate on it and then get to your salvation. But the second dimension of the Eka Tattva Abhyasa is when that devotion to one form, as long as it's not contradicting the others, the second dimension of the Eka Tattva Abhyasa is to see the same form in all the other forms.
In everybody, yes.
In every form. So that, when you see Vishnu, and it's like, oh, this is a beautiful thing. I can see my Shiva there. But when you become prejudiced, so it's like, sorry.
And also all these gods, right? They're tattvas, and there is certain tattvas that you identify with, right? Shiva is either a meditator or a Rudra avatar, right? That's what he is. He does like almost like a Rajasik type. And then other gods are different, So I think it is to help us associate with something so you have an anchoring to kind of like move forward and then eventually go past that. Is it
it's
this life, next life, or lives later? That's a different thing, but
It's an alambana, to actually have an alambana for dharana, so that, based on your mixture, you connect to certain thing. And then first, progress yourself to build that, concentration to get into sattva state using either meditation or bhakti or whatever. But eventually, the Satwik knowledge is all about seeing commonality, seeing oneness. Now, what is Rajasik knowledge? Rajasik knowledge is like Pritaktwena, which is already divisive. Pritaktwena tu yajnanam nana bhavan pritak vidwan. Pritak means it's like separative, it's a divisive. Veti sarveshu bhuteshu tajnanam veddirajasam. Which is like that knowledge is considered to be the mode of passion by which there is a lot of people are seeing the divisions and saying like, this is better. And in our entrepreneurial thing, that's what we do, right? When you start a company, our first thing is positioning and messaging. And so it's like, my Casby is better than somebody else's Casby. My cloud is better than somebody else's better. My this thing is better than this stuff. My watch is better than, my phone is better than somebody else's. And same thing is happening in the yoga. Vinyasa Krama is better than Shivananda's sequence. Shivananda's sequence is better than somebody's sequence and this and stuff. And we're all trying to see, or Isha program is better than other program, Art of Living or some other thing. So this is always trying to create, a dimensionality or the divisiveness to, and that's how then whatever from the divisions, you then try to make certain profit and loss. It says like, this is better because it's actually organizationally, or, you have some metrics that are out there. But when you are in a sattva state, then you get right to the bhava, the mission. And it's like, okay, hey, that actually gets there. If you go this way, this is what you're going to get. You can actually do this. And then you should be able to effortlessly navigate through all the islands of the knowledge to be able to get something from Isha, something from Art of Living, something from, Mihalay Flow, something from your science, something from your math, and something from your medicine. Why do I have to even have the thing of allopathy versus Ayurveda? Integrate where there is. So, but Rajas is something that is divisive so that we can actually get into profit and loss. And tamasic knowledge. Yatu Krishnavad ekasmin. Yatu Krishnavad ekasmin karyasaktam ahaitukam karyasaktam ahaitukutam atvarda vad alpamcha tat tamasam udahritam. What it actually means is the tamas is the one you actually know very little. That one thing that you know, and you think that is the Krishna, that is the whole. You're ignorant. You only know very little. But little you actually grandize out of delusion and illusion. You think that you know everything. And from there, and then that knowledge is also alpamcha. You're all one in the trivial, mundane stuff, gossiping. What do I eat for the dinner? What is this celebrity doing? Why are they doing it? Away from the brahmacharya, which is like, contemplating on the Brahman, which is like, who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? Why am I here? It's just, instead of contemplating that, you're always spending time on alpamcha, and very little, but then you actually come in. The other day I was having a conversation with somebody, and then they basically immediately said like, yeah. Gandhi, we were having a Gandhi Jayanti. And then they know one dimension of the Gandhi, and basically it's like, Gandhi is one of the most useless person that we ever had. And I was like, okay, maybe not. But whether it is rooted from the notion of understanding the fullness, perhaps not. Perhaps not. And then we focus on one little dimension instead of being upeksha. We show light on perhaps one little thing, and then you grandize and then make that into a whole. And then you focus on the alpamcha. That is what is this tamasic knowledge. So again, the three dimensions of the knowledge, it comes from, one is something that is trying to unify, trying to see the oneness, trying to represent excellence, trying to pursue the unity and the divineness, and not focusing on being indifferent about the divisions, but amplifying the good. Rajasik is more for the divisions, but it is for some kind of a profit and loss kind of a metrics, organization thing. Tamasic is the worst knowledge, because you basically look at one small thing and then you grandize and then you magnify that as to be the whole, and most of it is the focus is on the alpamcha. Do we all agree with these dimensions of sattva, just tamas types of knowledge?
Yes.
Okay, so then let's look at, from that knowledge, let's actually go look at the types of actions. So what is the Satwik action? Satwik action is rooted in the welfare of others. Word essentially is niyatam sangha rahitama ragadveshatah kritam afalah prepsuna karma, apala prepsuna karma, yattat satvikam uchyate. Afala prepsuna, one that is not rooted in afala, something what is in it for me. You're not worried about what's in it for me. And niyata sangat rahitam, in other words, one that is not associated with any raga, any dvesha, any actions that are not associated with any raga or dvesha, either your favoritism, nepotism, something that you love or that you hate, that is devoid of any cliches, something that is rooted in what's in it for me, something that is rooted in something that is not rooted in what's in it for me, something that is, you're not looking for any rewards. Those types of actions are known as sattvika. That means you are intentionally being aware to overcome this asmitaness. You're doing the actions more from in the service of others. And that is what love is. When we say surrender, you're always thinking from, what can I do for you? And there is a beautiful saying, that somebody says, when I close my eyes, I'm united with myself. And I'm trying to know this. When I open my eyes, and I'm like, what can I do for you? When I open my eyes, I'm in the thing of what can I do for others. When I close my eyes, and I'm just connected to my own self in the meditative state. So that is kind of the sattvic action. And then what is a rajasic action? We actually, it's like yattu kameipsuna karma, just like, the motive is karma, driven by a desire, divine by an outcome. Sahankarena vapunaha, saha ahankarena, ahamkarta iti ahankara. Something that is driven by the kind of ego or ahankara, which is like, I did this. I taught 10 classes. I started some programs in India. I did this, I did that, or I built so many companies, or some of this stuff. So sahankaraina vapunaha. So those actions that are driven by kame, one driven by a motive, something for you, and it's also associated with the sense of doership. Kriyate bahulayasam tad rajasam udahritam, which is driven by your motive, enacted with your pride and sense of doership. And also kriyate, there is always this feeling of like, being a sense of stress, which is like, I'm working so hard, I'm doing so many things, I'm like so busy. And I'm like, those people who are established in sattva, they, you see them doing so many things, but they always seem like, they're like, this lack of sense of doership. And I was like, I'm so busy, I'm like doing so many things. So this is what is a Rajasik action, which is like driven by motive, driven by ahankara, sense of doership. And then it's like, and then they always seem so busy and stressed out. And they always say that I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time. This is a Rajasik action. And what is a Tamasic action? Anubandham Chayam Himsam. It's rooted with violence, out of, which is like ignorance and violence, and out of reluctance. Anapekshacha Paurusham. It is something which is like, the Paurusham, the intense emotional thing, which is like ahankara. When it is so intense and delusional, it becomes Paurusham. Mohad arabhyate karma yatta tamasam uchyate. Mohad, it is like, it is more of a delusional pursuits. It's driven by, like what it says, like, it starts with a desire. When it's not fulfilled and you have ahankara, and when you nurture it, it becomes delusional, and you become something like, you're intense, you're violent, and it becomes hurtful. And that's when tamasic actions, in our history of mankind, so much of these things, first it started with, something to fulfill, like some of these conquests. It's all about displays your pride. But eventually, once you get into it, then you fall victim to your own sensory delusionally kind of stuff. And then they will become tamasic actions. It's no longer about your own display. It's about, you go into the adogataha, you move downwards, and you inflict so much of negative thing within yourself, and the thing, like what Alexander said in the finally. It's like, please put me in a grave with my hands empty, something like that. So this is a tamasic action. Violence all around within you and this stuff. If you go and look at them, are they healthy and are they happy? No. They're constantly masking, numbing their senses, and doing more of the same thing. And that becomes tamasic. And that's where, people are now being, because they cannot operate in a different thing, they need more chemicals, more stimulants to continue to operate in that state, and more and more and more of this. Okay, now what are the types of happiness? Okay, we looked at the Satwik knowledge is one of the unification knowledge, and then Satwik actions are those that are, always in the welfare of others, without being what's in it for me. And there's always about creating the joy for people around you, and then that's how the joy within happens. And then now let's look at the types of happiness, Satwik happiness. And this is joy eternal. Yathadagre vishamiva pariname amrutopamam. This is such a beautiful thing. The Satwik happiness, it might actually start looking like initially when you are trying to do these pursuits, it may in fact, taste a little bit bitter. It may taste like a visham. But eventually, pariname, it transforms into amrutopamam. Over time, it becomes amritam. That is the type of Satwik happiness, right? Which is like, when you wake up, sometimes, you eat something like, what is this, Karela juice. It's like, it tastes so bitter. But eventually, more you do it, it actually becomes like a, the amritam, or even the asana practice. When you first, start doing it, it sounds so painful. It's almost like vishamiva. It feels like torture. But once you taste the nectar, the tenane pyayasva, then it is just like the moment you're on the mat, you're actually doing it. You're like, every moment it feels like a dance, and you see the prana moving through it. It feels more joyful experience. Tat sukham satvikam proktam atma buddhi prasadajam. So that happiness, it seems like, not quite a joyful thing, poison at first, but tastes like a nectar over time, is said to be is the happiness in the mode of goodness. And that is rooted in the pure intellect. It's not driven by the ahankara, any of this stuff. That atma buddhi prasajakam, because that is also allowing it to reveal our true nature, which is the Purusha, the divine nature. So, when you are taking on a new type of actions in the discipline, while it looked like painful in the beginning, but don't be discouraged by that. Over time, prayatna saitalya ananta samapatyabhyam, and then eventually it becomes effortless, and then that's when the ananta samapatyabhyam is going to result. And then what is a rajasic happiness? Vishendriya samyoga, which is like the one that is playful with your vishaya, the objects of pursuit, and then the sensory excursion. Yattadagre mrtopamam. It sounds like, initially you're gratifying your sensory pleasures, you're satisfying your ego and ahankara. And it's like, achieve these things. I'm the CEO, I rang the bells and New York Stock Exchange and this stuff. But eventually, pariname vishamiva, tatsukham rajasam amritam. Rajasam amritam. Basically, it's like, it looks like amritam. You do a nice party where you eat some nice modakams, laddus. It tastes very good. It tastes like, this is actually, it's better than amritam actually. Some of these laddus. And then, but you eat 10 of them in a row in 10 days, and then they become pariname vishamiva. And then you feel like, the modakam, doesn't look quite that interesting anymore. And then it results in some other kind of effects. So this is kind of a rajasic thing. Rajasic thing is like, it is a display of vishaya, pursuit, and then the indriya, and then it creates a temporary pleasures and the gratification. But then eventually it becomes happiness, leads to sorrow. Eventually, if you do that again and again, it leads to vishamiva. It's rajasic happiness. And what is a tamasic happiness? It's sardo eternal. It is not good in the beginning. It's never good in the end. And you are not even aware of it. It's because you are in the delusionary mind. In the delusionary mind. So which is yadagre chanubandecha, sukam mohanam atmanaha. Mohanam, it's actually a delusional thing. Nidralasya pramodatham tat tamasam udahritam. So which is like the one that is rooted in, which is like sleepiness, lethargy, alasya. People who do not want to do anything, what they would want to do is, they don't want to put any effort. So they just want to take a pill to feel like, a little bit of an activation. Or, now I see, people wake up and the first thing that they do is a monster. A monster probably is more of a rajasic thing. But nidralasya pramodatham, and then mohanam atmanam cha. It is like, you are operating from the delusionary mind, and then you basically are indulging in different things. That is like sorrow now, sorrow later. Like as an example, when you're doing the yoga practice, somebody comes in and makes an intention. They are not prepared the ground, but they come to the yoga practice and then says like, today come what may, I'm going to touch my head to the toes. I want to do a forward bend and I want to make sure that I want to grab my toes. But you are not prepared and you simply come and try to do it. And then that effort is not good. In the end, you injure and something, you end up in a hospital. So beginning is is messy, and then end is messy. That is a tamasic happiness. Right? That is kind of the nature of the tamasic happiness. So again, we looked at the knowledge, the types of actions, then the types of joy that each guna compositions will lead us to. And then the last dimension that we're going to look at is Satwik giving. So when we give something, when we share with somebody, the Satwik giving, which is where it is no expectations. Datavyam itiya dhanam diyate anupakarine diyate anupakarine deshakalecha patrecha taddanam satvikam smritam deshakalecha patrecha taddanam satvikam smritam, which is like, number one, whenever we are actually giving to somebody, that whoever we are actually giving to, we are actually giving it to the right person. And then anupakarine, in other words, anu means follow. Upakarine, in other words, you are giving without any follow on benefit for you. You just give with no expectation. That is a worthy giving. And then, but it also is like you need to be giving it to the worthy person.
Exactly. That is the one that I caught before when I read this verse too. Srini, it's not like give. Don't go give it to somebody that is
Exactly.
not undeserving per se, but somebody that could harm somebody else with what you gave or did.
Exactly. The proper time and the proper place. In fact, there's the responsibility of the giving. Right? As an example, when you have money, you can say it's like just because you feel like giving, it's like I'm writing a $10,000 to some school. And then what if they do with the $10,000? If they actually go and spend some thing for a party and then they do it. It's imperative that when you're on the Satwik, you have to make sure that
you
is
have
actually
the responsibility to do
the proper time, proper place, and proper utilization. Otherwise, you actually are not.
As you're saying, right? Money is dana, but do I want to go give it to somebody that's spending that money on, like maybe a drug addict, right? That would be totally wrong, which means you are responsible for their demise further.
That becomes a tamasic giving.
Exactly.
When your intention might be rude, but the nature of the giving actually resulted in a tamasic giving.
So we are responsible in giving too, whether not just giving monetary, right? Even in advice, whatever it is, or sharing knowledge, everything that comes within each of our being, we are responsible for it.
We are responsible to make sure that is given, it is utilized.
I'm obviously speaking only half a sentence. We're not just responsible because what's coming out of our mouth or whatever, but where it lands up and the outcome of it.
Yeah, I think some of those things, as an example, like, when we do certain things in India, like, we make it an imperative thing. We actually sign an MOU. And we sign an MOU and basically says like, this is what it is. These are the metrics. This is what we needed to do. Otherwise, let's look at it this way. When I went and saw a bunch of government schools in India, and they have so many computers, the government spends so much money, and most of the computers that are given, they're all sit in some room. Nobody knows how to use them. They're all like, put something, and then there is agarbattis. Which is like, this is absolutely, it's almost like a criminal wasting. It's tamasic. There is no accountability. There is no accountability of anything. And whose money is it? It's again from the taxpayers' money. And it is not serving its own divine purpose. So Satwik giving is when we are in the thing, like, as an example, this satsang, right? Or Sridamji as an example, when he is doing it, he creates a right kshetra, and then is it. And then there are only some people show up, but some of them, we all take it, but at least there is a proper kshetra for it, right? And So we actually need to be, whatever we are giving, we need to make sure that it is actually, number one, anupakarine. We don't expect anything in return, but exercise, take it a little bit more of our own responsibility of the deshakalecha patrecha, which is like on the receiver, make sure that it is for the worthy and for the right context and right time and this stuff. And then what is the Rajasik giving? It is very profit and loss. It's motive based. Yattu pratyupakarardam, it is like a give and take. It's like you give somebody to something, you may not even want to do it, but you write a check because, it's almost like bribing. You give something because you want something else to occur in a different dimension. Pratyupakarardam phalam uddishyava punaha diyatecha pariklishtam. Klishtam is like, one, you are not really comfortable giving. You're in a klishta. It's like
grudgingly giving, right? That's what that is. I don't know if you use that word. I'm on a small device today. Yeah, grudgingly, like,
you're
yeah.
Yeah, you're not in harmony because you don't resonate with it, but you know that is pratyupakarardam phalam, which is like, hey, let me do this because it's going to Taddanam rajasam smritam. This is like rajasi. It's like with reluctance and grudging, with the hope that someday it's going to pay back. It's said to be one. It is a very profit and loss game, right? You're not in harmony. Sattva, which is like, just be joyful, anupakarine, you don't expect, but you know that the cause, you like it, you joyful. It's an expression of happiness. That's a karma yoga, not expectation of happiness. Right? Tamasic giving is torture. Adesha kale yadhanam apatrebhyacha diyate. Apatrebhyacha diyate, which is like, to the wrong person, wrong worthy. Asakritam abhagnatam tattamasam udhritam. So what it essentially is like, it's always like to the wrong apatra. Patra bhishucha diyate. Just like knowingly or unknowingly. And you basically, it's like, actually, if you're doing it knowingly, that means, even though you're actually giving, you're actually becoming a tamasic person at that time. You're exhibiting a tamasic guna. And that charity,
this is actually the exactly opposite the Satwik giving, right? It's like, exactly. Where this exists, that doesn't. Where Satwik giving exists, this doesn't happen.
Yeah. Some people write checks, some, just to instigate. Right? This all becomes, tamasic giving. So these are the dimensions of sattva, tamas, and sattva, rajas, and tamas. The knowledge where we all need to get to is the sattva, which is like, number one, where the knowledge that we always need to try to seek for unification, even if there are divisions, let's not focus on them, but more on the unification. And then sattvic actions, which are more of the ones that are nirmalatmam, not based on any ahankara, but it's always the actions are in the welfare of others. And then Satwik giving is for the right place in the right time, the one that is worthy, and make sure that is for worthy acts, and then the expression of happiness. And then we also looked at the tamas, which is essentially in the Kriya Yoga, we looked at it. I'm going to skip through this. And then we went into the final section, which is like, how do we transcend the gunas? It's like, now that we are actually going through this nature of the balancing of sattva, rajas, and the thing, but what is our true nature? How do we transcend these gunas? So this is where we become kind of unite with the self. So we become more intuitive, and we let the Purusha just express itself through us. And we become somewhat in a flow state, not connected to any one of these kleshas, avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, and avinivesha. And this is the highest knowledge. Traigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna, Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna, Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvasto, Niryoga Kshema Atmavan. Nistraigunyo. We do the in the inquiry. Nistraya Gunyo. In other words, we basically have to transcend the gunas. The triad of the gunas is what is our ultimate pursuit. As we are indulged in this, sattva is where we need to get to, but eventually from that sattva, we become gunatitas. Nistraya Gunyo
Yes,
Bhavaga.
and for liberation, that's like the last step before you can go beyond.
And then that's when it becomes, we basically escape this maya. Nirdvandvo nitya sattva asto. From the sattva, you essentially then become the gunatita. The duality of the Purusha and Prakriti disappears. You basically unite with the oneness, the self. Sattvastu niryoga shema atmavan. So then we become reposed in our own atma jnanam. So the duality disappears. Once you become the gunatita, that's when nirdvandvo, we become the one. And that is what is in Patanjali is defined as samyama. And when you do the bahiranga sadhana and then move into the antaranga sadhana, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, the more samadhi that you're actually getting into it, you're always like, only the object remains. There is no duality. You don't remain. Only the object remains. And then the object is, the self. And then that's when you have inner peace and outer dynamism. There is oneness. The Krishna Tattvam is essentially gets manifested within. And Patanjali also described this in some of the sutras. I'm not going to go into those things, but what Patanjali explicitly says, we all with our intellect, sometimes we actually mistaken sattva state with our true identity. Sattva, while it is revealing the Purusha, but sattva is an experience. That is still an experience. That is what is being presented by our mind and intellect. Sattva is not Purusha. So, which is where we become, but sattva is what we need to build more of so that we can get into the samyama state, in the meditation and dhyana state. And then eventually the more sattva that we inculcate in ourselves, then from that sattva, we actually become gunavaitrushnasya, we become gunatita, and then we become one. We become, and that khyati, that viveka, is the intelligence, is the highest knowledge. That is the Sankhya. That khyati. Just like, which is what Patanjali defined. That is what is one of the beautiful things that is the Ashtanga Yoga. Yoganga Anushthanat Aviveka Jnana Diptihi Ashuddhikshaye Jnana Diptihi Aviveka Khyatehi. So which is like, that ultimate discriminative knowledge of the Sankhya is going to come in. That is Prakriti and Purusha, which is we transcend the Prakriti. But for that, our practice, the Prakriti is the only one that allows us to do all these margas of the Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and then Raja Yoga, and the Ashtanga Yoga. That is all the preparatory thing to ultimately get to that Aviveka Khyate of the Sankhya, to unite with a true identity of the self, Nitya Sucha Sukha Atma. So this is what is our ultimate journey of the Sankhya. And this is, the Gunas is an integral part of it. Sankhya, what we covered in the first stage, establishes the Prakriti and the Purusha, but the Gunas is the one that actually determines, how we are going to take on this journey to ultimately unite with ourselves. So that's all I have for ourselves. And I know we probably have taken a lot of time today. If you have any questions and comments, we'll spend some time. Otherwise, we'll talk about our next exam.
I don't want to drag this more. That's what I know. Everybody's busy. One question is, so Arjuna, when he said he doesn't want to fight, was it his, and he was saying, I'm going to become a brahmachari or whatever, I'm going to become a sannyasi and I will give up all these things I'm going to do. So was he feeling the Satwik Guna was higher at that point of time? That Krishna said, no, get into your Rajasik, even though knowing all the
He was
things,
tamasic.
but still.
He was tamasic.
Okay. He was tamasic.
Because it's a delusional thing. He was operating out of ignorance because he was like, he was worried about killing and his own family. So he was rooted in, at that time, it was more tamasic thing. He was in a grief, he was in a sorrow. And then the whole Dharma Sankata was all irrational thing. It's like life, death, costume, my own people, this people, that people, or all this stuff. But the thing is, it's a delusional mind at that time. And then the more he actually come in the end, he comes down to, it's like, now I understood everything. Now let me surrender to you and let me go do my job. But it's like, why it happened, but it's not like, the program upgrade happened instantaneously, right? Even through the battle again, when Abhimanyu was there, then he has his own kind of a family, kind of a, Bhava Dvesha, but he was acting. He was being more aware and he was doing it. And then he's still going about and doing his job. And it's a continuous process. Did I answer the question, what you're asking, Savitaji?
I think so. I think, so you're saying sometimes we have to take tough decisions in life. And it might hurt people. It might, people might not find it suitable for their, from their perspective. But you still act what needs to be acted, but still make sure that there is no, you or constantly be in the place of, this is separate from, like so firing somebody or something like that. Something
exactly in the Kshetra.
Saying that we are here for a bigger purpose here.
Exactly. Kshetre dharma kuru. Kshetre dharma kuru. Right? When I'm in a job right now, as an example, right? Let's say I'm exactly going back to your situation. Going something, if there are some inefficiency and if it's a wrong alignment, you may have to lay off a team. The market conditions have changed, and you are in the business of the market conditions of, like take an example of taxi industry. Taxi industry is there, that's very prevalent, and then suddenly the technology improved, and then there are things like Uber that came in, which is to provide, let's say, better value add, better service, to, and what did Uber do? Uber actually now anybody from anywhere can get this, drive they want, from the convenience of a phone. Perhaps, at the best market prices. And we can all say it's like, all the taxi people might see it's like, we're all like no livelihood. And at that time, that is what the nature presents itself, right? The dharma is like, at that time, the taxi is an inefficiency. And that needs to be eliminated. But how do you do the transformation? There's a process, right? While you're doing that, can you empower them? Can you actually give incentives so that they can also offer a better service, better marketplace? That is one way of doing it. Most of the thing, what happens is, most people are in the tamasic state. They don't want to change. They resist change. And then they get disrupted. And that's what Vivekananda used to say about India. He used to cry. Whenever he used to come back from on the ship, when he used to see this, apparently Sister Nivedita said on one of the comments, which is like, see this land. That first time when she was visiting, with him in India, when he was coming back, it's like, that is the land of the spiritual knowledge, the highest knowledge, oh master, I can see it, I can feel the thing. And he was like, yes, but that land has now become tamasic. People are not reinventing itself, from the times, and what it used to be, the land of the seekers, that invented all of this, the highest knowledge. the ability to parse this entire universe and Prakriti and Purusha, so that everybody in wherever the situation that they had, they could actually realize that ultimate joy. But became more delusional, more superstitious, lethargic, and being taken for a ride. More biases, more dvandvas, more divisions. So I'm not saying that to that one sector. I'm giving a more broad. So these are all more tamasic things. And then Rajasik is more a nature of more of a capitalism, ultra capitalism. But I think, Arjuna at that moment, he was tamasic. Even all of us too. Sometimes, when you don't want to act is because, and then we try to give a reason. It is like, no. We want to be nice to everybody. And that nice could be a tamasic giving. If somebody is like, if they're not performing and if you still pay them, that is exactly like a tamasic giving. Because once you are out of that place, let's say you move somewhere and that other person will be exposed and immediately it's like, they won't go anywhere. So it becomes imperative for us to make sure that we do our dharma in all the contexts. I think so. Umaji, anything that you want to add?
Dharma employs your intellect, what's right, what's wrong. I hear tapas say all the time, the delineating intellect, because with Sena you can say, is this right? Is this right? So you act from your dharma, but the intellect will help you, guide you, do the right thing. So
what is the dharma, right? Dharma is always dynamic,
yeah,
but there are
it's always dharma, because it's in situ, right? It doesn't, what applies in one place does not necessarily apply in another situation. It's not one size fits all.
Yeah, Jati, but there are certain universal dharma, like, that's why we call it Sanatan Dharma. Like, as an example, like, the Yama Niyama principles as an example, right? What we call is a Jati Desha Kala Samayana Vichinna Sarvabhauma Mahapratam. Those are some of the eternal vows, like, Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya.
Exactly. Speaking the truth, Ahimsa, as you mentioned, or maybe,
non-stealing, brahmacharya, and then satya, tapaswadhyaya. So those are eternal dharma. I think most of us in the right now is, and then there is a other dharma. The dharma then that sits on top of it is like, let's say if you're in a nation has a constitution, there is certain laws. Then on top of that is your office dharma, your company dharma, and then on top of that is your family dharma. So, but the basic substrate needs to be this universal dharma, the eternal dharma. These are universal human values. Where we are struggling right now is there is no codification of the universal dharma, and that is what is taken over by faith a little bit, right? The faith is what is taking that place, and then the faith is all conditional dharma, right? It's all Rajasik dharmas actually. Everybody is actually coming up with the conditional truths to drive the needs of that particular faith or the institution. So those are all not eternal, but that's what is happening. And on top of that, nation, and this is what's sitting, and it's creating all kinds of conflicts. So what we need to come back to is kind of the eternal dharma. The eternal dharma, particularly from the yoga philosophy, they're done very well. Like, even niyamas, everybody's responsibility, no matter where you are. It is like, what is that thing? Saucha Santosha, Tapaswadhyaya Ishwar Pradhani. Number one, you commit to yourself being clean, hygiene. And you commit to yourself being happiness, inculcate contentment. And then tapas, always work hard. And swadhyaya, don't work hard, and then surrender the outcomes. That is what everybody knows. How many people are working hard? Like for example, in India, the victory is like government job. That means, I can work less.
Unfortunately.
Right? So the basic dharma vows are there. And then, if you actually go into, it's like, the yamas. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha. It's like ahimsa.
I was thinking about Asteya and Apagraha because I had attended like a yoga thing a long time ago from India, from a Satwik movement or something. They were talking about apagriha, stealing, not even mentally. The thought of stealing is also as wrong as actual action.
Correct.
And then thinking, like, I don't know where it was, Gita or
It's a
somewhere where I
Nikaranism.
read that. It was interesting, Shini. I always thought, like, let's say, somebody makes you angry and you want to, let's say, slap them, right? So I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
go slapping anybody, but the first that you thought about it, that is wrong.
No,
And
that's what
you
it
said
is.
something to them, that is further wrong. You took an action, that is the worst one. But if you back up, you got the thought that you wanted to hurt somebody verbally, whatever it is, that itself will collect karma, is what I read. I don't know where it was in Bhagavad Gita or where. I was like, oh my God, because often before that I was ignorant, because I do correct myself, I'm like, that's not right, Uma, erase. That's what I tell myself. I have this word called erase, like, undo, right. But I never realized that, मैंने कुछ नहीं बोला, so I never really said anything to them. They don't know, but there is no such a thing as they don't know. We live in this universal conscious. So I put my, this drop of water into the universal consciousness of ill thought or unsavory thought or whatever. So it was interesting for me to learn that.
And this is what is a thing that we say, right? It's a beautiful thing the way you said it. Manasa vacha karmana, trikarana shuddhi.
Yes, manasa vacha karmana. That's probably, yeah. And the other thing is, the one that knows that it is wrong and still does it will acquire more karma. And that this is not a threat, but it is more like so you can use that. You actually gather more karma than the one that did a wrong thing out of ignorance. It's like a judge doing something wrong versus an aam admi that doesn't know that stealing is wrong, but he's wanted to just survive or whatever. I that example from wherever I heard just went right to my head.
Actually, I mean, willingly kudukushi karte hain, right? Which is like, but I laugh at it. Even my own thing, we know what is right or wrong, but sometimes, we actually knowingly we do the wrong thing. And actually, apparently, the people who are in the absolute spiritual path, which I don't claim myself to be, but in the real people's spiritual path, exactly reiterates what it is. People who are ignorant, if they do it, it's okay. I mean, okay, in the sense that,
it is still wrong, but that okay is smaller than the one that is on the path, knows, and fir bhi galat kaam karte. They are like several times more.
Right. Which is like, but Duryodhana, that's the difference between Duryodhana and Arjuna.
And right? Arjuna, right?
And, or even a Ravan and Ram, right? There is a beautiful graphic that one time I did it, which is like, Ravan, his 10 heads represents, he is like a scholar of the Pancha Puranas and the Vedas. The 10 heads represents his scholarly capabilities. He is one of the
he was Shiva Bhakt, everything that except this horrible thing that he did with Sita, he was a virtuous man.
Right. But the 10 heads also has the 10 kind of negative qualities, which is like, ego and this stuff. So basically what it actually says is this Vijayadashami. Actually, I'll probably post this graphic. What it says, like, the self.
Oh, we all have these 10 versions in our personalities, probably.
We have these kleshas, right? In ego, desire, lust, and anger, and all that stuff. The thing is, when we willingly cut our own 10 heads, the negative qualities, that's when we repose ourselves into Ram. Ram is the self. Ravan is the negative, the 10 bad qualities that we all have in some form of the other things. And then we basically are doing a victory of our own journey. This entire Vijayadashami
is really what it is. That light that they're lighting is in our own life, in our own soul. These are all representations of where we need to be to make us understand. Instead, unfortunately, we become very just, how do you say, just
Actually, what has happened is the stories were designed so beautifully. I mean, it's one of the finest creative expressions. But then what happened is the stories became so
warped, right? They became literals. Just became Ravan ka dahan kar do aur ho gaya, mitai khao, ghar jao. Fir se, kutte ka dum tedi hi tedi, right? That's what they do.
So there's a beautiful line in Swadesh movie. Man so jo Ravan nikale, unki man mein Ram hai.
Ah, beautiful.
Man so jo Ravan nikale, unki man mein Ram hai. So that is what is the real Vijayadashmi. Vijayadashmi is not like, Satyabhama and somebody else and or Deepavali or somebody is like Narakasura or Ram's Ravan victory and all this stuff. It's like us conquering our own tamasic nature within us, Rajasik nature in us, and then getting into Sattva state. And then it is more of an inward journey than an external journey. And then we always externalize the things. And to a point, we basically is like, it is like, everything is like, kahan se aayega wo? Krishna is going to come, abhyadana madharmasya, with a Shankha Chakra Gada. Where is this Shankha is going to come? When is the Chakra is going to come? Dude, this is like, do yoga. That is what is Krishna. Yoga means not the asanas thing, but kind of the path of Ashtanga Yoga or Karma Yoga or any one of them. I think this is where it is actually need to get to. The beautiful thing is, I think this is always happens. Abhyadana madharmasya tadatmanam. See how many people are now in my entire life journey. I've never seen this kind of situation setting right now, where so many of us are contemplating on what is the right truth, right path. When I was in India, when I was growing up, it was not happening. When I was not doing that, maybe it was not needed at that time. But the more...
I think there is an overall conscious level shift, Srini. I'm also seeing really youngsters. I belong to another satsang group. There's kids that are 17, 20, 19. Yeah. How beautiful is that they're exploring?
See, this is what is like, Sambhavami Yuga Yuga. The more dharma that gets a little bit disturbed, then the shift is going to happen. And it's not going to happen because some dude with a flute and, chakra is going to come, or like, third eye is going to come and do this. It's actually manifest within.
Absolutely. And I feel like individually, each of us are responsible to help that next generation, instead of saying that, they're privileged or this or that. And if they are a certain way, somehow we are responsible for how they are. Yeah. Because we didn't show them the right thing at the right time. I do know that, again, they come with their own karma and everything, but it is our responsibility to point them in the right direction at the right time.
Correct. So, Umaji, let me bow down to the Krishna within you. Let me bow down to Krishna within Savitaji. It's just like we're all nothing but Krishnas. I think we can just go talk like this forever. So eternally, let's everybody take a few breaths. Isha vashamidam sarvam yatkincha jagata jagata tena takyena bhunjita ma gridah kena svidhanam. This entire thing belongs to that Ishvara. Everything belongs to the Ishvara. We only use the limited things for our own convenience, and everything else belongs to the Ishvara. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashantu, Ma Kasyad Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. We wish everybody to be happy. We wish everybody to be free of sorrow and illness. We wish everybody to see only auspicious things, and let there be peace and excellence everywhere. So thoughts of your palms. I have a love of knowledge. Cup your eyes to transmit this beautiful satsang knowledge to us so that we can act accordingly, see accordingly. If it's fine, open your eyes. Thanks, all of you. What a beautiful evening that you always create. So it was someday. So a couple of things. Let me stop the recording.